Well, let's return to our test drawing and see if we can further improve workflow when you're working with CAD software such as gCADPlus. So here I'm looking, if we look at the tab, I'm looking at a landscape plan on an A3 sheet, and if I select, I've made it the outline of it grey, and if I select that, you may be able to see here that the zoom scale, the view scale is 68. So if we pan up a little down in the title block, we've said scale is not to scale in that for this particular view of the design. If we go across to landscape plan A2 now, this is an A2 sheet, I'd like to talk about the way of presenting your plant schedule information. Now in this case, if I pick that same floating viewport, notice over here that it's a fixed scale of 50 and it's set at fixed. So when this is printed on an A2 sheet, you'll have a scaled design that is scaled 1 to 50. We've also included the scale bar, which helps people orient themselves. But notice the degree of difficulty I have had in trying to display the plant schedule. I just have no room to play with it at all. I think a much simpler way of showing your schedule is to create, say, an A4 page and just put the schedule on it. So now we have the symbol, the botanical name and common name, and the total of plants that are going to be used to fill out to do the actual planting. If we come to a final one, which I've labelled landscape plan A2 species, you may be able to see that the notes, design notes, have disappeared here. So if we go back to our, and this is also 1 to 50, and it's also a fixed scale, but I'm doing my plant information in a different way, and you might like to work with this and see how we go. If I select, sorry, I don't select this information, if I select the floating viewport and carefully right click and go to viewport layers, we've turned off layer text just for this view here. And I'll cancel from there and escape. So what I'm doing now is, because all these symbols here have been assigned to entries in the plant database file, I'm using a tool in the gCADPlus drop-down menu called Smart Plant Label. And so just looking at this one drawing, all of the symbols can be labelled. We don't have our concept notes, but they're on this particular sheet, so we could, in fact, I'd like to suggest that you can get rid of the plant schedule that I've tried to fit in here. So let's move it off to the side here, so we can look at all the information we want for concept. What we're trying to do as a designer is there, whereas here we've turned off that text layer and we're now working on a layer, a smart label layer. Let's see how that works. So we'll go back into the model. You notice now that there are multiple layers, information on two different layers overlapping. So what we want to do just for the moment is turn off the text layer, because I wanted to illustrate that you can label quite nicely. Notice that the little arrowhead on the, if I pick here, that's a leader, whereas previously this information was put in a different way using a different tool. So I'm going to delete that. So Lamandra longifolia, there are 3 of them there, and they are labelled and we can see them. So it's very easy to put that label information on. If we select this one, it's Acacia and Neura. So we can say gCADPlus Smart Plant Label. We are asked down here, select the symbol for alternative copies of it. So we could label several of them if we wanted, but I prefer just label one in a group and hit enter. The prompt says, do we want label it with a line or a leader? I quite like that little blob, and that's part of the dimensioning style that I'll discuss in a moment. Leader, and input the first point of the leader line. Come over here, and do we want to pick up the code? No. Botanical name, yes. I'm just responding to the prompts. Common name, no. Do I want to count? No. And in goes the little label. So it can be positioned around however you want, because it's a leader. So can you see it's really quite easy using this system to put all the botanical names in. Let's do one more. We'll pick this one. The prompts that we just went through have all been burnt in for the moment. We're going to use leader, input the first point. Maybe we'll keep going at that angle. And do you want to pick up the code? No. Can you see they are stored? Yes, no, no, and we're in. So that symbol there represents where we're going to put the native frangipani, Hymenosporum flavum. So you can go back to the plant schedule, of course, and we come down here to H, and there's the symbol inside the plant schedule. I mentioned that the labeling of those plants is done. If I select the leader, notice it's done in a dimensioning style called label species. If we now turn off that information which is on a label called LSmart label and turn on the text layer, notice that the blob at the end of the leader is larger, but if we pick it up, it's in a different text style called adding design styles. So I hope you can see that I'm using a combination of techniques to try and get the right sort of communication to the client. We can print off a design at a fixed 1 to 50 with all the notes, information, design, thoughts, and we can print another one off where we're giving species information, and we can put as much of that on. We can label every individual symbol if we wanted to, and we've also got a complete plant schedule. So I hope some of those ideas assist in improving workflow in the gCADPlus environment. Of course, there will be occasions when your clients will demand more of you as far as detail in the plant schedule is concerned, and that's easy to fix. So we previously went gCADPlus down to plant schedule and drew the standard one. Let's now draw a custom content, and we'll include the plant symbol. I'm just responding to the questions here. Do I want the red circle markers? I'll say no. Do we want to include the type of plant it is? Well, we'll say yes. Do we want a code, a 4-letter code? That might be useful at a later time if we need to give some construction information. So we'll say yes. Do we want the pot size? Well, we'll say yes. Do we want to include the botanical name? Yes. And the common name? Do we want to print one under the other? We'll say no. We want them run across from left to right. And the text height for the text within the schedule is left at 150. So we'll come across here and put our corner point in. We'll pick the same corner point, but we're going to need a reasonable width now. So we'll come out here and hope that everything will fit, otherwise we just do it again. And that looks fine. So you may remember we had an A4 sheet where we were looking at the plant schedule. So we double click in here now, and we need to increase our porthole view of that data, make it larger, still larger, and then we can display it on the layout. When you get to a layout such as this, notice that there's a series of dots around it. If you select the floating viewport and right click, you can deactivate the viewport in that way, but a quick shortcut is just move just slightly inside it and double click, and that deactivates it as well. So here we are now, we're providing a lot more information. We've got one bit of information about pot size, and you may or may not have that extra information. Don't forget, if you go back to the model, you can actually get in here, and that's just a block. So you can get in there and edit that particular block. So I'll close the block editor and return to the drawing. So you can give extra information with very little extra work.